Symbol Mash. You're listening to Health Matters on the United Intentions Radio Network. If you're catching the show here in Atlanta on WGJY FM 99.1 or in Florida on WWNN 93.5, thank you and welcome. Remember, my show airs every other Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Got some exciting news. We have a new radio station who we're serving, and that is WMTA 107.3 in Kentucky. Shout out to all of you listening to us in Kentucky. It's great to have you on board. For all those of you who are catching the show on any number of the major platforms with social media, like Facebook Live, Spreaker.com, iHeartRadio, and so forth, it's really great to have you guys joining us as well. I have a special guest today, but before we get to that, I've got some announcements to make. Number one, if you have any questions, remember we take our questions from Facebook Live. And we have a call-in number, which is 678-495-4345. Once again, that's 678-495-4345. And for those of you watching on social media, like Facebook Live, it'll be scrolling across the bottom during the entire duration of the show. Please do me a favor and wait till about 5:20 or so before you start calling in or before you start sending in questions. We want to get the show rolling here, so it'll take us a little bit. But please, we welcome your questions. All right, let's talk about buying your Get Your Life Back DVDs. To do that, visit www.getyourlifebacknow live and take advantage of getting your DVD that can help you save your life. It's news you can use. And don't forget, this Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have Whole Healing on WGJY FM 99.1 with Dr. Amy Daries. She puts on an excellent show, and she'll be interviewing Dr. Robert Attia, an oral and maxillofacial surgeon. And then one of the topics they're going to be talking about is why do we have such a rise in oral cancers? Join her. She's fantastic. It'll be this Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget it. We're proud to be beneficiaries of the City Gala. Visit www.citygala.org and citysummit.co and start accelerating your business the socially conscious way. We'll have our own City Summit event to help raise funds for our foundation in October. We invite you to follow us and City Gala for more details. All right. I have a very special guest. I promise you I will always have great guests. Today is no exception. I have a friend of mine. She works at the local Costco. She got off at 2 o'clock. No, I'm kidding. I had to do that. You're going to find in a moment that my friend, Dr. Jean Lawrence, has an amazing sense of humor, and I had to do something to set her up to laugh a little bit before the show got started, and I just got it. So Dr. Jean Lawrence is a master herbalist, a certified functional medicine practitioner. Says she has a doctorate in naturopathy, a doctor of naturopathic medicine, a PhD in natural medicine, and has a diplomate of the American Clinical Board of Nutrition. She practices in Toccoa, Georgia, and Rutledge, Georgia, and specializes in hormones, blood, and saliva testing, stress management, fatigue cases, blood sugar problems, and so forth. She is the amazing Dr. Jean Lawrence. Jean, it is a pleasure. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
You are very, very welcome. I want to start our questions out. You know, we're talking about hormones today. I know you can talk about a vast array of different topics, but I know you love to speak about hormone issues. And if I'm not mistaken, I think isn't about 80% of your clientele women? Is that about
Actually,
right?
it's closer to 95% is women. And I've never met a woman yet who isn't having some kind of a hormonal imbalance or that believes that she is having a hormonal imbalance and has not had it checked.
Well, that's interesting because you already answered one of my questions. So I want to get started this way. I want your opinion on this. Do you think that the women who lived in the 1950s and 1970s had more hormonal dysregulation, or do you think the women of current day have more trouble?
Oh, it's definitely today. I mean, with all the thousands and thousands of chemicals that are dumped into our environment every year, and the plastic exposures that we have, and the Wi-Fi exposure, and just every day, all the things that are going on. Most women put an average of 135 different chemicals on their bodies before they even leave their house in the morning. So we're just living in a toxic soup.
Jean, talk to me a little bit about that. When you say they're putting 135 different toxic chemicals on, what does that look like? How do they do that?
Well, okay, most women are going to shampoo, then they're going to use a scented soap or body wash. They're using conditioner, then they're using products on their hair to dry their hair. Then sometimes they're maybe doing their own nails, so they've got nail polish. Nail polish remover is extremely toxic, especially to the liver. And then they've got makeup that they're using, and deodorants, perfume, just all these things combined synergistically can be a real problem.
Yeah, what I'm going to say is so ridiculous to me. I heard several years ago, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm hoping that they're no longer putting lead in lipstick. But several years ago, there were still 400 companies were caught using lead as the inherent agent in lipstick. Do you know anything about whether they're still, hopefully
I'm not
they're
sure
no longer.
about that. I know that several cosmetics actually contain gluten.
Yeah.
And so if people are gluten sensitive and can't figure out what they're doing wrong, it can actually be their makeup.
Yeah, interesting point. So toxicity is a major, major topic, and they're all different kinds. Let's talk about toxic issues that women can run into without even knowing it. We talked about some things having gluten in them, for example, like lipsticks. And it wasn't too many years ago. Like I said, I haven't followed up the story, but I remember reading that over 400 companies were found to have heavy metals in their lipstick, and they, of course, used them because they allow the lipstick to stay adherent to the lips. Sounds brilliant, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
So let's talk about some of the other insidious ways that women become toxic in their own homes.
Okay, well, a lot of women use plastic bottles to drink out of, and we know that plastics are hormone disruptors. And so they actually mimic estrogens, and they're called xeno or fake estrogens, and they actually go into your system and cause a lot of problems, as do the cleaners that women are using every day. So a lot of women, I always ask if they use bleach, especially if they have thyroid problems, because chlorine can negatively affect thyroid health. Right. So I want to be sure that if their water is chlorinated, that they're using a shower filter. They'll say, well, I'm not drinking chlorinated water. Well, okay, that's great, but you're showering in it. And so in the hot water, your pores are open in your skin, and the chlorine is going right into your skin,
right,
and causing problems with your thyroid. So I see a lot of women using bleach products. They're actually using antibacterial soap every 5 minutes, which is a nightmare for their immune system.
Right. Very cancer-causing.
Yes.
Jean, one of the things I want to mention, a lot of women, when I bring up the topic of using bleach as a cleaning agent, will say, well, Nelson, of course I wear gloves. What they don't realize is that they're breathing in the chlorine vapor.
Yes.
And folks, you really, really, really want to look at what are your priorities. A lot of people who come to see me will say, Nelson, I have to spray my house with pesticides. I'm just not willing to have roaches. I want you to really think about that, because though the people, and this isn't a personal attack on exterminators, but using the organophosphate poisons that they use to kill roaches is very toxic to you. And one of the things that you have to understand is anytime you use something that kills another organism, it's killing some part of you.
That's right.
So let's talk about that for a moment. For example, if you're using one of the local exterminators, once again, please don't call me with relative who owns an extermination company. I'm not trying to be the heavy against them. I'm trying to be in favor of you all being healthy. And one of the things that I want to talk about, Jean, is why are these toxins so poisonous, and what do they do to dysregulate your hormonal system?
Okay, so I always ask people, I like to dig deeper than the average bear, so to speak, and I like to ask people questions about what they're using at home that they may not even think is toxic. So I ask them if they use Roundup, and I have never yet had a multiple sclerosis patient who has not used Roundup for years and years. So even if a woman says, well, my husband just uses it, it's still around, and you're still going to get some exposure to it. And it actually blocks your body's ability to make folic acid. And your immune system desperately needs folic acid in order to function. And so do your neurotransmitters, which control your mood. You need folic acid in order to make them. And having your house sprayed for bugs, as you were saying, Nelson, is a nightmare. And so there's just a toxic, and when you have children in the house, they're smaller, closer to the ground. They're even getting more exposure than we as adults would be.
Right. It's interesting, Jean, that there are days in the springtime that I don't go outside because you can tell everybody has sprayed their yards with Roundup, and you can smell it. Hours and hours later, you can smell that they have that everybody in the community has done their yards.
Oh,
So once again, people think, well, I'm not walking on the lawn. Yes, but you are breathing it in. It is getting in your body.
yes. And also, if you buy produce that is not organic, there's certain things that we don't use on our crops anymore in the United States, but we ship them to other countries, and they spray their crops with these these issues, the pesticides and other kinds of products, and then we only actually inspect 2%
Right.
of the food that is shipped back into this country.
Gene, one of the reasons I tell everybody do is as much as you can, make sure you get organic coffee, is because there are people think that they stopped making and selling DDT, for example, in the 1970s. Not so. Companies still make it. They ship it to these foreign countries who spray our coffee crops, as an example, and then send the coffee back to us.
That's right.
So we're still finding DDT when we do chemical assays on people. And what's terrifying is some years ago, I remember reading an article where they were finding, when they were doing studies on the livers of polar bears, they were finding DDT residue.
Yes.
How insane is that? A little way from, for example, continental United States to where you might find polar bears.
That's right. And so we can't just avoid all toxins. We can't possibly do that because we have to pump gas, and sometimes we're eating in a restaurant, maybe it's not organic, and so there's always going to be toxic exposure. But the key is to optimize our body's health to rid ourselves of these toxins, and then our hormones become more balanced.
Yeah. And I want to say one more thing about that, Gene. For example, you're right. We all are going to use our cars. Probably in our lifetimes, for the most part. I may be wrong. I hope I am. We're going to be using gas, at least for probably the next 10 or more years, 15 more years.
Right.
And so when you pump gas, don't stand there and breathe in the vapor. I always go to the other side of the car and watch, so that when the counter says full and stops, I know. Then I walk around and I reconnect the hose, and we go from there. So little things like that. If you're going to use bleach, make sure you have really adequate ventilation. Keep your windows open or have a fan that sucks the toxins out and so forth. All right, let's look here for a moment. Let's go to a slightly different topic here, unless did you have anything further you wanted to say about that, Gene? All right, Gene, let's look at the toxicity, meaning the effects of emotional stress. Because for me, outside of things like environmental toxins, that's got to be on the hit parade for the top 3 issues that can really trash your endocrine system. So
yes.
let's talk about that.
Okay, so as a functional medicine practitioner, I like to explain the root cause of problems to people. I want them to understand what their bodies are doing. When they leave my office, they have a greater understanding of why I'm going to do what I'm doing for them. So I like to tie things together in ways that maybe other practitioners don't. So, for example, if you're very stressed, your adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys, and the word adrenal, ad means next to, renal, kidney, add renal, next to your kidney. Mm-hmm. So it secretes, of course, cortisol in response to stress, which it is supposed to do. But long-term stress, and who of us out there hasn't had long-term stress, especially moms and people with busy jobs and demanding bosses, et cetera, fill in the blank. Everybody has some kind of stress. What the adrenal glands are doing is they're actually utilizing progesterone, which is the hormone important to balance your monthly cycles. It's using that to make cortisol to keep you alive. So this can lead to a lot of problems with your monthly cycle. It's lasting too long, it's too heavy, you're passing clots, it's just a nightmare, and then you just end up on an antidepressant or something, and no one has a Prozac deficiency. I like to tell people that.
Yes. Gene, listen, we're going to take a quick break. Thank you. I want to finish this thought because I think it's very, very important. Folks, I'm Dr. Nelson Bullmash. I'm interviewing Dr. Gene Lawrence. We're talking about the delicate balance of female hormones. We'll be back in a moment. Don't touch that dial.
The United Intentions Foundation is proud to announce that we're beneficiaries for City Gala, a foundation that supports humanitarian, philanthropic, and educational efforts. The City Gala is produced for the purpose of promoting equality, assisting in access to higher education, funding mentorship and entrepreneurship programs. The gala also pushes influential individuals to become activists and face the challenges of current events. We've been fortunate enough to be selected as one of the foundations slated to raise money and garner support from influential and remarkable people. To get involved, visit www.citygala.org and learn more about this wonderful foundation. You can also join their mastermind club and have access to top executives and influencers from different industries to help you network and build your brand and business. We're honored to journey to success with us.
Hello, everyone. We're back. I'm Dr. Nelson Bulmash. My guest is Dr. Jean Lawrence, and we are talking about the delicate balance of the female endocrine system. Jean, we got interrupted. We had to take a commercial break. You want me to cue you in, or you want to take off from where you were? We were talking about how stress impacts the regulation of the endocrine system.
Yes. So progesterone is the calming hormone, and it's necessary to regulate not only your cycles, but to keep a baby. If you can get pregnant and you keep losing children over and over, which is heartbreaking, a lot of times low progesterone is to blame for that. So when you're stressed out, you're using up the progesterone that you need in order to help you to be calm and help your cycles to be normal length and normal timing. So that's a really big deal. But also, if you're not eating often enough, if you're skipping meals during the day, now some of you may be on the keto diet, you may be doing intermittent fasting. If you can handle that, if you're what's called metabolically flexible and you can do that, that's great. I think that's a great idea. But for people who are hypoglycemic, and I always tell people that, mood and energy follow blood sugar. So if your mood is down, your energy's down, you probably need to eat something. So if you go too long without eating, it's going to stress your brain. If it stresses your brain, it's going to stress your adrenal glands, and then there goes more progesterone. So a lot of women that I see are just lacking in basic progesterone because they're so stressed, and it can cause a host of problems.
Right. And it's very important to realize that when you get really, really stressed, you can actually directly convert progesterone to cortisol.
Yes.
Which is,
yes.
By the way, Jean, I'm going to make a statement. You just got back from a big summit on hormonal issues. My understanding and in my experience working with men and women at my office is that probably the worst problem dealing with hormonal regulation with men and women is getting cortisol under control. Is that still the primary stance?
Yes, absolutely. Because now there's of course 3 phases of adrenal fatigue. The second, the first phase is just stuff everybody does every day. They get a phone call with bad news and then they find out it's okay. And so that's the alarm phase. But the second phase is where you can have high cortisol but low DHEA, not DHA, that is in fish oil, DHEA, which is a hormone that actually converts into other hormones, so especially testosterone.
Right.
So you can actually have high cortisol but low DHEA and have just debilitating fatigue. But the whole point is to take adaptogens, if possible, or herbal adaptogens,
right,
but to help that cortisol level to come down because you will absolutely burn yourself out. So it'd be like if I bought a brand new car at a dealership and I left the dealership and I held the pedal all the way down 100 miles an hour until the engine blew up. Well, that's not going to work with your car. It's not going to work with us either.
Right. Well, and I'm glad you pointed that out, Jean, because, of course, what happens when your cholesterol is endlessly too high is eventually the adrenals give out and you have too little cortisol. And when that happens...
Yes, then you're done.
You're done.
You're done.
You got... it's so interesting because when stress overwhelms the adrenal so that you have low cortisol, you're ineffective in adapting successfully to your world.
That's right.
And at that point, you absolutely have to see a healthcare provider who can help you restore your adrenal function and quite frankly the function of your entire endocrine system and your brain, your immune system and so forth, because they go to special places in a handbag, as one might say. All right, so let's look at this. We've indicated that environmental toxins are very bad. We've indicated that you can use cosmetics and so forth, cleaning agents that are very, very bad, that can really dysregulate both the immune system, the endocrine system, that there's a very delicate balance there. We've also talked about how emotional challenging events can really do harm as well.
Yes.
So let's talk now about, let's say you have somebody, for example, who's in stage 4 cancer. This is kind of common these days. Cancer is something that takes a lot of lives, unfortunately. So you're going to be under this chronic state of activation, and your cortisol is going to be through the roof until it isn't. What kind of things, Jean, can you do from an eating perspective, or just things to help take care of yourself so that you at least handle the stress better?
Well, I know it's been said hundreds of times is that we need to do things that resolve stress. And so I always like to suggest that people do some kind of a mindfulness practice, either prayer or meditation, and just going outside and sitting. We don't do this anymore. We're on our phone every minute. We think if we don't see the latest post or the latest Twitter rant or something else that we're missing things. Really, you're not missing very much. I mean, honestly, you're not. So the best thing is just sit outside, listen to the wind in the trees, listen to the birds, and just sit. And we don't do that anymore. And I tell people that we are human beings. We're not human doings. And we don't sit anymore or just talk to other people. We're always on an electronic device, and this is constantly bombarding us, and our brains are saying, I can't do this anymore. So by doing that, but also by feeding ourselves natural foods, eating like our great-grandmothers did, that's one of the best things we can do. I mean, she grew her own vegetables. We can't always do that, but we can have access to, farmers markets and things that have good produce and organic sources, and eating clean meat is huge. So by nourishing ourselves not only physically, but mentally and emotionally is huge.
Thank you, Jean. I want to talk about something that not many people talk about, and that is, people talk about exercise, but what people like me, for example, used to do is when I'd get stressed, I'd go in and blow myself out in the weight room where I was like so stupid tired I could barely talk. Why is that not a good idea?
Okay, so I see a lot of women that have anemia, and they've been tested, and their doctor may have said you're not necessarily anemic, but I do different testing to verify that. And I see a lot of women that are anemic that are going to the gym 4 or 5 times a week, and they're lifting weights and they're doing aerobic exercises. Well, the problem is that when you're anemic, you do not have adequate oxygen flow to your muscles, to your brain, to your whole system to carry nutrients. So when you go and you lift weights or you run, those muscles are using a tremendous amount of oxygen.
Right.
Well, your brain says, I'm sorry, I cannot utilize the oxygen for your muscles. I need it for me to work.
Yeah.
And then you actually have a negative benefit from overtraining.
And by the way, I want to make sure that my message was clear. I'm not talking about people who are healthy. I'm talking about people who've been under chronic stress for a long time.
Yes. So when they run, especially runners, more than weightlifting, say, if someone's running and they've been under chronic stress, your brain thinks you're running from something. So you're not going to heal your adrenal glands by running. It's better to do walking or swimming or something that's going to utilize your muscles, but be gentler on your system, because I sometimes tell people in severe adrenal fatigue, I don't even want them exercising for a while. I just want them to rest.
Well, in the case where you end up with really low cortisol levels, you have to.
Yeah, you have to, or you're going to burn yourself out. So what we do is, as in this country, we push ourselves and push ourselves. Why are we doing that?
Well, we're likely running from something ultimately.
Yes, we're running from something.
Jean, the message I want to leave people with, once again, I'm not saying you can't work out hard. I'm saying when you're suffering from the effects of tremendous stress, a divorce, the death of a loved one, the loss of a job, something that's really deeply, deeply painful, that keeps you up at night so you can't sleep, you want to make sure that you're not throwing your body, whether you go to the gym or where you go out for a real hard 10-mile run or more, into another fight or flight situation. The adrenals help handle stress. They put out hormones, 52 known hormones that help with all kinds of things, but they're key for helping you adapt to stress and to the recovery of stress. And so once you beat them up so badly that those poor adrenal glands are panting away and they can't catch the breath, so to speak, like the poor horse we saw in the paper the other day who had collapsed. I think it was in South Carolina. He was pulling a huge trailer full of people, and the poor thing just collapsed in the middle of the street. He was so overrun that he literally dropped. He could no longer even stand, and it just broke my heart to see it. And that's what we do to our adrenal glands. And so once you get to that point, correct me here if you disagree.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, it can take years. When I really destroyed, when I was fighting cancer and autoimmunity, it probably took me 6 or 7 or 8 years to really restore my adrenal glands. So folks, this is really key here. You do not want to beat up your body, your organs in particular, so badly that you can't recover, because it's not a quick recovery. When you destroy the tissues that help you to recover from tremendous stress, guess what? There's just no backup system. They have to heal themselves, and they have to heal so that the rest of the body can heal.
That's right. And long-term stress also, you will lose something called a negative feedback loop from the adrenals to the pituitary gland in your brain that makes your thyroid hormone. So long-term stress is actually going to shut down your thyroid gland and its function, and there goes your metabolism. And then you have something called reverse T3 that increases with stress, and T3 is what actually runs your metabolism. So if you make more reverse T3, then you're shutting your metabolism down. So this is why women say, I'm stressed out and I gained 10 pounds.
Yeah. So let's go on to our next important topic, Jean. Let's talk about two things here. Let's talk about number one, what kind of foods can be an incredible stress that cause dysregulation of the hormonal system for women?
Okay, so the first things that I like to look at are blood sugar and, of course, adrenal health. But I want to make sure women are not anemic, because that's going to affect everything, but also that their blood sugar is normal. So I check fasting insulin besides a test called an HbA1c, hemoglobin A1c, that tells me if they're pre-diabetic, because if they have blood sugar problems, then that is going to cause more, usually abdominal fat, and which creates more inflammation, and it makes the cells more resistant to insulin. It leads to insulin resistance, which leads to diabetes. And then they have more inflammation and more estrogen being made, and it's kind of a vicious cycle.
Yes. As a matter of fact, you and I are going to have a show where we're going to talk about that, because that's a whole show in itself.
Yes. But when women eat trans fats, which are anything that says partially hydrogenated oils on it, this is a huge thing. First of all, it stays in your body for 103 days. So if you eat that Krispy Kreme, 3 months later, it's still hanging around in there, but it's also creating a barrier to your cell membrane where insulin cannot get into the cell.
Right.
And it's just wreaking all kinds of havoc. But also, bad fats increase inflammation, and I see a lot of inflammation in my patients. And then good fats dampen inflammation. And if you don't have enough good fats, you cannot actually make hormones. They are hormone precursors. So women that have skin issues or, headaches, a lot of times this is an essential, they're called essential fatty acids. It's very important to get those in the diet, like flaxseed, and take something like blackcurrant seed oil and evening primrose oil, and all these fats are beneficial. And so if a woman says, I'm not going to eat any fat, she is doomed. She's absolutely doomed to hormonal destruction. Right. And if she doesn't have enough cholesterol, she can't make any hormones either. And so having really low cholesterol is also a big problem.
Jean, I want to add one thing that's very, very important. What trans fats do to the cell membrane is they make it rigid. The cell membrane, it has, of course, is made of 60% fats and 40% of proteins. And these proteins are meant to shift in the cell membrane so they can dock chemicals, hormones, neurotransmitters. So if you're eating hydrogenated oils, you lose a lot of the capacity of the cellular membrane to allow for proper docking of these critical proteins. And so, if you want to really feel badly, make sure you eat lots of margarine and other hydrogenated oils, because it will really make it difficult to dock key elements like proteins, neurotransmitters, and hormones that are meant to get into the cell to influence the cell in a very particular way.
That's right. That's right. And especially if someone is already diabetic or pre-diabetic, the last thing they need to eat are trans fats. They're incredibly damaging, and they cause massive amounts of inflammation. And I don't know anybody who really doesn't want more inflammation, right?
Yeah, and let's go into that, Jean, because, Jean, when people hear about inflammation, what do they think about? falling down, getting a boo-boo, or I strained my hamstring.
Right.
I have inflammation in the muscle. Let's take that another step forward. Let's talk about how inflammation occurs of glands, for example, of the thyroid or the ovaries.
Yes. Now, I see a lot of low vitamin D in people. I would say out of 100 people that I might test, I might see 2 people who their vitamin D level is adequate. So this is when I get into digestion for a moment. My main concern with my patients is correcting digestive issues and absorption and assimilation of nutrients. You can take the best quality supplements in the world, but if you do not absorb them or utilize them, what is the point? So I like to make sure that people's digestive system is working. So if their gallbladder has been removed, and then they will typically put you on a once-a-week dose of 50,000 IUs of vitamin D, and then after weeks or months, they say, gee, I wonder why your vitamin D level isn't coming up. That's because your gallbladder is gone, and you need bile salts in order to absorb vitamin D if your gallbladder is missing. But you need gallbladder support if it is still there, which we hope it is. Hope it hasn't been removed. But if it has, it's okay. We can deal with that too. But when you have that, then you have the bile that's going to absorb your fat-soluble vitamins, also your essential fatty acids. So vitamin A, D, E, and K, which are your main fat-soluble vitamins, need gallbladder function in order for this to happen. So if a woman has too much estrogen, for example, it's going to thicken her bile out of her gallbladder. It's made in the liver, stored in the gallbladder, just waiting for a signal that you've eaten some fat. And then if it's not thin enough, it will not be excreted in order to break your fats down. Well, the problem is high estrogens from eating meat that's not grass-fed or organic, drinking out of plastic bottles, just all these hormone disruptors. You have too much estrogen, then you're going to thicken the bile, no vitamin D absorption, which means you can't get rid of your old hormones through your liver properly, and then you have thicker bile, and so on and so on. And it's a catch-22. So vitamin D levels being low are a big, big deal, especially in tension-type headaches, cycles that are irregular, PMS, just all kinds, and of course your immune system and inflammation. So with good fats, you're always going to dampen inflammation. So I see a lot of high inflammation markers on blood work, and I always see a low vitamin D level that correlates with that.
Yeah, very, very definitely. So Jean, let's explore this notion a little bit more about good fats. So when you talk, and by the way, it's remarkable to me how often I still run into a woman at the gym who tells me she does everything she can not to eat fats. How can we be in 2018?
I don't understand that.
I know. I don't either. I don't. Don't be that person. You're going to have lots and lots of health challenges.
That's right.
So, Jean, let's explore ways of eating. And look, we're in a time when you have so many different authorities, if you will, on how to eat. Let's just talk basics, okay? How do you eat to both decrease inflammation, help so you have adequate digestion, adequate digestive function, so you get great digestion and assimilation, and you put out the fires of inflammation? What kinds of things do you recommend to your patients?
Well, a lot of people have undiagnosed food allergies, and I don't always do food allergy testing. A lot of people that come in already tell me, I've already gotten off gluten, I've gotten off dairy, I've gotten off sugar, but sugar is the #1 inflammatory problem. So a lot of people go to the gym and they work out and then they go eat a candy bar. Well, that's going to kind of undo what they were just doing at the gym because sugar destroys muscle. So I always recommend that people with heartburn, especially, #1, they have to get off gluten. And I usually don't suggest gluten and dairy at the same time because I want to see which one is probably the causative agent. That's right. So I want to see, is it gluten that's doing it? Or is it dairy that's doing it, or maybe both? So, of course, gluten causes inflammation, and sugar. Those are the top two, and then dairy, and then other people have egg issues, soy, peanut allergies. They have all these issues. But if you start out with one food issue and you seem to be escalating into more and more and more food issues, then we have a gut issue. And that's a whole nother program to talk about the gut. But I usually suggest, first of all, that they do the paleo diet and then move into keto, because a lot of people, they've tried keto, they've tried paleo, and they say, I can't do it. I felt worse. I felt bloated. I didn't feel okay. Then I have improper digestion if I cannot handle a diet like that. I can't break my fats down and I can't break my proteins down. So now we're back to stomach acid. And stomach acid, if I cannot have enough stomach acid, and I really want to mention this because a lot of people drink alkalized water. I have a real problem with that, because I want your stomach to be as acidic as possible. So when it is nice and acidic, you're going to absorb all the minerals that you need for your body to feel better and function, especially people with fibromyalgia. Minerals are a huge issue. You're going to break your proteins down into amino acids. You're going to make your neurotransmitters, which are going to control your mood and your memory. So if you're drinking alkaline water and you start noticing that, my memory isn't quite the way it used to be, or have more brain fog, that may be part of the culprit. But also having adequate stomach acid is going to signal your gallbladder, if it's still there, to secrete bile so that you can absorb not only your minerals through the acid, but also your fat-soluble nutrients. And then you're going to have normal bowel movements. Now, you would not believe how many people that I see that have abnormal bowel movements.
I would think probably more people have abnormal bowel movements than normal bowel movements.
Yes, and I explain the digestive system to every person that comes to see me, because I want them to understand what their body is doing, and no one has taken the time to tell them this.
Right. Gene, one of the things I want to add is we're also living in a time when there are a lot of stereotypes and myths out there that need to be busted up. And one is, and I'm sure you'll agree with me on this one, we don't eat bleach white refined salt, but we do eat sea salt. Sea salt is very, very important, because without sea salt, you don't get the quality chlorine ions to make what we call hydrochloric acid, which is stomach acid. And so you also set up for failure if you don't get, and probably most people, unless you sweat a lot or eat a lot of protein, are going to be in a half a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon, teaspoon and a quarter of sea salt per day. And I always recommend to people that they do small amounts often. It should never, your food should never taste oppressively salty. And that's very, very important, because that's the way you give the substrate to the body for it to make hydrochloric acid. So you absorb minerals. So you absorb essential fatty acids. So you absorb proteins. So I want to make sure people know that, because it's just remarkable how many people come in my office and tell me, no, I do everything I can not to eat any salt. The truth is, if you go to the CDC, and I did this many years ago, and you look at the research, you find that people on low-salt diets typically die prematurely of heart attacks, because you get an electrical destabilization of the cardiac cell membranes, which means that they randomly fire, and you get to have coronary failure if you don't have proper amounts of electrolytes. So please don't go on a really low salt diet unless your doctor has said you have to, because you have extreme kidney issues or something. Okay?
That's right. And so without adequate stomach acid, you cannot absorb iron. So for you ladies that are struggling with anemia, if you're taking an antacid of any kind, you're not going to absorb your iron. And then you're going to feel worse, and then your hair is going to fall out, and you're just going to feel so exhausted all the time. And then you're going to be drinking energy drinks, which are a nightmare unto themselves. And so you're just going to be just anything to prop yourself up, when the problem could just be that your stomach acid isn't adequate. And I see this, a lot of women are concerned about their nail health, and if their nails are splitting or peeling, and they can't figure this out. Well, it could be you're going to the salon maybe too many times, but also it can be low stomach acid, and no one else brings that up to them. So it's very important.
I do, because I want my patients to have nice nails, Gene.
That's right. That's right, Nelson.
All right. So we talked about proper digestion. And once again, I can't emphasize this enough. What other kinds of things do you talk? We talked about stomach acid, improving stomach acid, so we absorb more protein, we break down fat better.
I'd like to talk about what is depleted when women take hormone replacement. May I talk about that?
You went there. Let's do it. A lot of women are on it.
All right. So I talk to women that are on birth control for years and years and years and years, and just, this is what your plan is, just so you won't have a heavy cycle. It is depleting all these things: folic acid, B6, B1, B2, B3, B12, calcium, magnesium, selenium, zinc, CoQ10, and tyrosine. Gee, I kind of need those things in order to work. So if I am even deficient in one nutrient, I cannot make CoQ10. Well, what is CoQ10, you might say? This is an enzyme that your body uses to run your energy cycle. So if you're taking oral contraceptives or hormone replacement therapy, you're depleting the things that you need in order to ward off the fun things that you might get every month, like migraines, muscle aches and pains, heart issues, just all kinds of things require all these nutrients. Zinc alone does over 200 things in the body. magnesium, hundreds of things. We can't even begin to understand all the things that these nutrients do in the system. And so it's important that we replace these nutrients, but also that we absorb the nutrients when we replace them. So I always want to ask women, why have you been on this? Is it because your cycles are too heavy? Well, maybe there's another way we can handle this other than taking this product. Now, I will tell you that sometimes women have to have intervention. They have to have medical intervention.
Right.
They have to have an ablation done or something else if they're just bleeding too heavily and it can't be stopped and their life is just draining away. Then I understand that. I don't have a problem with that. But my job is to try to say, let's get you as healthy as possible, but let's not keep depleting your nutrients every month and then expect you to be able to function. Just not going to happen.
Yeah, very, very, very good point. So I hope everybody knows who's listening that you, regardless of whether you want to go paleo, you want to go Mediterranean, you want to go vegan, you always, of course, want to educate yourself so that you make sure that if you're on a particular diet, that you're focusing on whatever the weaknesses are. And yes, all of these diets have weaknesses. My friends who are vegans, historically low zinc, low B12, low protein, and I see it over and over
and low
over.
iodine.
Low iodine,
Yes.
Thank you. So, do research. If you're going to do a particular diet, there's no such thing, Jean, you agree with me on this?
Yes.
No one diet that suits everybody's needs.
That's right.
The truth is, the way you eat should change seasonally. I'm a huge, huge believer in that. There's a reason that certain fruits and vegetables, for example, are available at certain times of the year. And I think eating seasonally is a very, very, very important thing. It helps reduce the chance of food allergies because we weren't designed to have bananas or pineapples every day. The truth is, most of us from this country are either of African descent or from various countries like Spain or from Mexico, and then many others are other Europeans. And so we didn't have access to this until we had planes, trains, and automobiles. And so we eat foods that we were never really designed to eat. So one of the things I advocate that I don't hear many people talk about, Gene, but I want to mention this because I spoke to a friend of mine who's a legend, Steve Halterwanger. And he was interviewing a young woman who came to us from Russia. And she was from the Ural Mountain areas. And of course, her family living in the Ural Mountains was in no way, shape, or form known for veganism. Why? Because it routinely gets down to apparently 30 degrees below zero or more. So when he investigated how she ate, he found out that what she often did, or what her mother did, was she'd get an inch-thick piece of real wheat, not hybridized, not sprayed with glyphosate,
Right.
and then take a quarter of an inch of pig lard and put it on. And she was, she thought, this is crazy. How can I possibly eat this way? And Dr. Halterwanger and I said, because you're living in 30 to 50 below zero, and sprouts are not going to help you generate the kind of energy
That's right.
to exist, to thrive in those conditions. So one of the things I advocate is find out who the longest lived people are in your family. And when you speak to them, ask them how they ate. Now, remember, if you happen to go back to the time when your great-great-great-grandparents, for example, were slaves, then obviously there are going to be real severe problems with their nutritional intake. But maybe go to where they came from, what part of the world they came from, and how did they eat there. Now, I know you're not going to necessarily be able to eat wildebeest or zebra, but get the closest option, whatever that may be, where you live. So, Jean, we're going to take another break here.
Okay.
We have lots more for you. This is an action-packed show here today. So I'm Dr. Nelson Bulmash. I've got my friend, Dr. Jean Lawrence. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about some of your case studies. Does that work for you, Jean?
Great. Sounds great.
We'll be right back.
Are you ready to be the hero of your own story? It's time to put the power of your health back into your hands. Join us for our free 25-day journey to get your life back now from chronic illness. Our doctors and experts will guide you back to optimal health.
Then he had abdominal pain. So then she gave him some rum to settle down because he can't relax. Well, then he has more abdominal pain, so then he took an ibuprofen, which of course can burn a hole through your stomach, and now you really have abdominal pain. He goes to the emergency room and they said, "You're fine. You're not dying. Your blood work's normal. You look good." His vital signs were normal, his labs were normal, but they didn't examine him. So sure enough, he's bloated. How can you feel good if you're bloated? All your intestines are swollen up. So at least I could confirm to him that he's not well. But the question remains, does he want to be well? Is he willing to do the work, to learn about himself, or does he wish to be clueless? Well, some of us want to be clueless.
Go to www.getyourlifebacknow.live and begin your journey today.
All right, folks. I'm Dr. Nelson Bullmash. You're listening to Health Matters. My guest is Dr. Jean Lawrence. Jean, we have some questions, evidently, and I'm sorry. I've been so excited and enthralled in this that I neglected the questions building up. Let's take a couple questions here. Sorry about that, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have two questions on Facebook from Melanie Michael. And her first question is, Dr. Lawrence, what is good to flush liver from microbes and parasites?
I usually recommend wormwood for that. And it actually also helps your digestion because it's creating bitters in the stomach. But that's really the best overall that I've seen. Parasite flush, I do a complex that I use in my office that contains black walnut hull, garlic. Garlic is excellent for that. So wormwood, black walnut hulls, garlic, and some cloves, usually to kill parasite eggs. Usually doing a flush like that, and if you're very, very toxic, you need to start at an incredibly low dose. And of course, if you're pregnant or lactating, you do not ever need to do a detox.
Right. Jean, I want to add, I'm just a big fan when people have specific problems like that are kind of complicated, to see somebody like you or me, somebody to oversee it.
Because, this isn't really what we do is not... And there's nothing against a health food store. Please don't ever think that. I mean, I love health food stores. They have a really cool stuff that I don't have room to carry in my office. Mm-hmm. But Nelson and I don't operate like a health food store where people say, hey, what can I take for this, or this? And I hand them a bottle. Because the body is very complicated. Our training has been extensive. And so we want to explore every avenue to find the possible root cause of why someone is having a symptom. Because by the time you have a symptom, you're already imbalanced. And so we want to restore balance to the system, but it's not always as easy as just taking one product and saying, okay, now I'm rebalanced.
Yeah, thank you, Jean. Dealing with parasites is really, really complicated. You got to handle lymphatic issues. You've got to handle digestive integrity issues.
Yes, and I also want to say that unless your bowels are moving normally, you do not need to do a cleanse. Yes. A lot of practitioners will put every patient on a liver cleanse. Oh, okay, you got to do this liver cleanse. No way. Not until your bowels are moving normally, because you cannot get rid of that stuff when the liver starts dumping.
Yes.
And you are headed for a nightmare. And then I get a phone call.
That's right.
And I don't want that phone call.
And gosh, I have seen people get so sick.
Yes.
Migraine, headaches, throwing up, horrible diarrhea.
So I don't suggest people do flushes really without supervision of someone like us.
And by the way, one of the things when you've been in practice, I'm closing the door on 27, 28 years, Jean. How long have you been practicing? 5.
But they've been awesome.
Yeah, but Jean's also super, super, super smart, way cut above intellectually. But what you find is when you see people, you realize that you got to get everything working before you start doing cleanses. If a person's liver, their kidneys, their digestion aren't working, you got no business detoxifying them. Right. You're going to stir up a toxic storm, and you're going to just replace or displace heavy metals. Parasites will migrate from certain tissues to others. So
yes, and also you have die-off. So if you kill the parasites and you don't take something that's going to, bind them up, so to speak, you've got all these little worm corpses floating around in your system, and you can actually feel worse. So it's always best to seek the advice of a qualified practitioner before embarking on a cleanse.
This isn't a very sexy topic, but it's an essential topic.
But it happens. It's 1 out of 3 people now has parasites. I see this all the time on blood work.
Yep. All right. Was there another question that somebody wanted? What was the other question?
So the other question again is from Melanie Michael, and
Thank you, Melanie.
And she says, when women go through menopause and do not take estrogen and progesterone, what should you take naturally?
Well, first of all, I would say have a hormone panel done to be sure that your levels are where they need to be. A lot of women have actually too much estrogen without knowing it, and low progesterone without knowing it. And progesterone is really important for bone health. So some women eat soy products. I'm not a big fan personally of soy products, but if they were actually fermented from Japan, they might be beneficial.
Good call.
But the soy in this country is so bad that I just do not recommend soy.
Right.
So actually fermented things like that. Also staying with more of a plant-based diet and making sure that the liver is cleaning out the old hormones is actually one of the best things you can do. The best thing that should happen in menopause, you had a cycle, you quit having a cycle, nothing else changed. No hot flashes, no night sweats, no dryness, no nothing. That's the ultimate.
And by the way, people laugh at me when I say that, but that can be achieved. You just got to be really, really mindful about how you live, how you eat, how you handle stress.
Yes.
It is a symphony that must be masterfully conducted.
Yes. And so did you want me to share a case study with you?
You took the words out of my mouth. We got
Okay.
about 9 more minutes. Let's do it.
So I see women from all walks of life, and I see that women are dealing with basically the same issues across the board. They're all stressed. They all have anxiety. They're juggling, kids and a husband and a job and maybe going back to school, and they're just overwhelmed. So I always want to deal with that. But I see a lot of women with fibromyalgia, and I had mentioned to Nelson earlier that if a woman does not deal with past hurts and abuse in her life, she tends to have more fibromyalgia type symptoms. I have seen this over and over and over. So if you're just trying to kind of bury things from the past, you will never be well physically. You can work out, you can take the best supplements on the planet, you can have your absorption working, but if you are not well mentally, you will not be well physically.
And you got to feel it to heal it.
That's right. So please get some help if you're having those issues. I see that, like I said, in fibromyalgia. So I had a woman who actually I saw, and she's been exposed to a lot of toxins in a job that she shares with her husband, and she's having endometriosis. She's already had one surgery. She's looking at the second one. She has a history of long-term birth control use. She's tired. Her gallbladder is gone. Her hair's falling out. I mean, this is basically what I see. This is the kind of people that I see.
It's pretty typical.
And so one of the biggest things is the toxins that she's exposed to are actually causing more problems. Plus, the birth control pill usage is just put so many estrogens into her system. She told me she's had problems with her cycle since she was a teenager. She also has a history of mononucleosis or Epstein-Barr. This is huge. Women that are completely exhausted, I always do an immune panel on them. I want to see if I'm dealing with mold toxicity, because mold toxicity, fungus issues, can actually mimic hormone issues. So a woman might be saying, I think it's my hormones. I think it's my thyroid. I'm not really sure. Well, guess what? It could be mold toxicity.
Right.
And it could be fungal overgrowth. Right. And they've all done the diflucan. They've done all these rounds of antibiotics, and it's just a nightmare. But these can mimic hormone dysregulation symptoms. So I always want to rule out, what am I actually dealing with here? So in this person, I'm going to order a hormone panel. I'm going to order fasting insulin because she already had some other labs done, but she has low liver enzymes. She needs some B6 and on and on and on. So I always tell people, you are a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and I only have 500 pieces. And with the right labs, whether it's saliva testing, urine testing, hormone testing, I'm going to get the whole picture of you. And that's what's important if I'm going to help you. So that's kind of a case. That's basically across the board what I see. Blood sugar issues that haven't been found. Hormones are all out of whack. Crying. I have a box of Kleenex next to the chairs in my office and you know what? Women apologize for crying. You should never apologize for crying.
Yeah.
Those are your relief valves. And if you have to use them, honey, then you use them. And if you need a hug, I'm going to hug you. I love to hug my patients. I love to love on my patients. And I listen to people. I actually let them tell me their story, and I listen to you so that you feel validated. Do you know how rare that is to find? Nelson does that. I do that. We know other people that do that.
Yeah, but it is rare.
It's a huge deal. And if a woman comes in and said a doctor said it was all in her head, no, honey. Normally it's not. A lot of times it's just a nutrient deficiency that's not that difficult to correct.
Thank you so much. Jean, we got about 4 minutes. You know what time it is?
Oh my gosh, it can't be time to go.
No, it's not
That
quite
sounded
yet.
so canned, didn't it?
No.
Oh my gosh.
No, not quite. It's time for final thoughts.
All right,
What
final
are your
thoughts.
final thoughts?
Okay, so if you can eat like your great-grandmother did, and lard actually is a great source of vitamin D. I want people to have fun, enjoy themselves. I want you to watch the Three Stooges whenever you get a chance to, because they take your mind off your problems. They're so funny. If you focus on helping others, those are the less chronically ill people that I see, are the people that are involved in outreach and helping others, and their mind is not consumed with their own problems. If we have an attitude of gratitude, that is a wonderful start. We're so blessed to live in this country. We have so many things going for us here. We need to really be thankful. But also, like I mentioned, dealing with past hurts and abuse is a big deal. But also avoiding the triggers, the common triggers. We always say that environment loads the gun, or genetics load the gun, and environment pulls the trigger.
Trigger. I like that.
Okay, so we want to make sure that our environment is as clean as, of course, humanly possible. Resting, relaxing, taking a vacation, turning off your phone.
Unplug, folks. Unplug.
Yeah. Turn off your phone, because I'm telling you, you're really not missing that much. Everything you're missing has already been said or done before, probably last week. So that's kind of my takeaway, but also to love and be loved by others.
Yeah. Really, really important.
Is really important.
So underestimated and undervalued,
yes,
unfortunately.
It is. Yes, it is.
Jean, I want to talk just for a second here. What do we have? About another 2 minutes? We got 2 minutes left. I didn't bring this up. I'm sorry. I took the jacket off of this book. But I want to mention a book that I think is really a great reference source. Yeah, don't worry. I haven't forgotten. And that is The Hormone Cure by Dr. Sarah Gottfried. This is an excellent book. My apologies. I don't know if you can see the title there. Let me mention it again. It's The Hormone Cure by Sarah Gottfried. Excellent book. Sarah, if you hear my radio show here today, I apologize for taking off the jacket. It's just always falling off when I read it. But check it out, folks. The Hormone Cure by Sarah Gottfried. It's a really fantastic reference book for all of you. All right, before we end and I say goodbye to everybody, how do they get a hold of you?
Okay, so another thing I'd like to say is I love doing what I do as a female, because I understand the marriage thing. I understand the kid thing. I get it. So when you come in and you break down in front of me, I get it. I totally get it. Whereas, you know, the hormone thing, we've all been through the hormone thing, okay? We've all struggled and suffered in some way with it, and we just want somebody that's going to understand us. Anyway, I have 2 different offices. I work in Toccoa, Georgia, and I work in Rutledge. And the phone number in Toccoa is 706-886-8800. In Rutledge, it's 706-557-0211. My website is lawrencehw.com. That's lawrencehw.com. And I also practice telemedicine. So if you cannot physically come see me, we can work out labs and tests and results and what to put you on and how to get you going and get your life back right over the phone. So don't despair if you can't get in the car and come see me. I would love to help you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jean. I really appreciate you
Thank you,
being
Nelson.
here.
You're just awesome.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's really great to have you here. I hope, folks, that you enjoyed this. I hope you benefited. By the way, this will be part 1. Jean will be returning. We'll do more of this. Folks, thank you so much. Dr. Nelson Bullamash of Health Matters signing out. Have a wonderful day. I'll be back in 2 weeks, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Take care.